must I do?
You must bring them to Mount Silea on Vulcan. Only there can both find peace.
Climb the steps, Jim. Climb the steps of Mount Silea. Silea? Bones, Mount Silea is on Vulcan. We're home. On Earth. Your life and your career stand for rationality, not for intellectual chaos. Keep up this emotional behavior and you'll lose everything. You'll destroy yourself.
The word, Suit? The word is no. I am therefore going anyway.
Kirk, if you do this, you'll never sit in the captain's chair again.
So Star Trek III: The Search for Spock was released back in 1984, and it's directed by Leonard Nimoy. It is the only Star Trek film to not feature Spock for a majority of the film, and Star Trek III, it picks up right after the events of Star Trek II, as the Enterprise is limping home after their battle with Khan. There's a noticeable absence on the ship, that being Spock. Kirk is feeling depressed over the loss of his best friend and thinks that Spock's basically gone forever. That is, until he finds out that Spock's Katra, or spirit, resides within McCoy. Incidentally, the Genesis planet in which Spock's body was left at the end of Star Trek II has reincarnated Spock through the Genesis wave, and now Kirk must reunite Spock's body with his Katra to conceivably put Spock's soul to rest for good. While a lot of people say that the odd number Star Trek films are bad, I have to say I disagree in the case of Star Trek III. While the film is not as good as Star Trek II, I still feel like Star Trek III is a very well done sequel, and it's very much a film of first. And what I mean by that is that the writer and director introduce a lot into the Star Trek universe that is seen for years to come. We get an in-depth look at Klingon culture. We see the classic Klingon Bird of Prey for the first time, and we also see the classic Excelsior-class starship for the first time, and USS Grissom, which is featured in the movie. It's the first time the Oberth class is featured in the Star Trek universe. Now, normally this wouldn't be significant because you could say, well, Sam, what sequels do is they introduce new things into a franchise. But I feel like in this film, it's a really good strength because all the things that they introduce become so pivotal to Star Trek canon and are loved through the subsequent shows and movies. Now, starting with the Klingons, the villain in this film, Krug, played by Christopher Lloyd, he was an okay villain. He wasn't as strong of a villain as Khan, but I still feel like Lloyd did a good job with the material he was given. Also, this is the first time in the Star Trek series we see the modern Klingon. Now, before Star Trek III, we had the Klingons of the original series that were cheaply done. They had the golden brown skin and no ridges, and they often acted like humans, but we also see the Klingons briefly in Star Trek The Motion Picture, but that was for less than 10 minutes, and we don't really learn anything about the Klingons. But in Star Trek III, Nimoy did a really good job as establishing the Klingons as a threat to the Federation. They come off as paranoid and ruthless in this film, and they give off racist tendencies too. Krug even says at one point in the film about preserving his race, and doesn't seem to have any issue with killing people that get in his way. We also see how the Klingons run their ship. If you screw up, you get killed. It's as simple as that. So now, I know I mentioned this in my last review, but I also wanted to touch on Shatner's performance again. There's one scene in this movie where, without spoiling anything, a tragedy befalls Kirk, and Shatner needs to show grief along with a mixture of rage with this situation, and I think Shatner handled this scene really well. And a lot of people give Shatner flack for his acting performances, but even as an adult viewing this, I felt genuinely bad for Kirk, and I never cringed at the scene he was in. I feel like in the 80s, Shatner was really in his prime as far as his acting goes. One of the really great things about this movie is that it feels like an original series episode at times. We have the strong, albeit cartoony villain at times. Kirk has his, hand-to-hand fist fight at the end. We've got the Vulcan mysticism mixed in. We've got the ship battles. We got everything that makes for a good Star Trek episode and good movie. Having said all that, Star Trek 3 does have some weaknesses, though. At one point during the film, the Star Trek commander tries to justify decommissioning the Enterprise and says the reason being is because the Enterprise is 20 years old. The Enterprise is actually closer to 40 years old at this point in the timeline. Yes, you could say Kirk has been in command of this ship for 20 years at that point, but saying it's 20 years old doesn't really take into account the captains that came before Kirk, Captain Pike and Captain April. It's a small nitpick, but to hardcore Star Trek fans, these inconsistencies can really get under our skin, especially when the director, Leonard Nimoy, who plays Spock, is so familiar with the show and characters. Also, Lieutenant Saavik returns in this film, but instead of being played by Kirstie Alley, like she was in Star Trek II, she's played by Robin Curtis. And I don't think Robin Curtis did a bad job by any stretch of the imagination. I just feel like when they recasted Lieutenant Saavik, they should have just made an entirely new character, because Robin Curtis plays an entirely different character as far as I'm concerned. In Star Trek II, you can tell that Lieutenant Saavik still struggles with her emotions and has a lot of questions about Vulcan culture and logic, and Spock is her mentor in Star Trek II, but Robin Curtis plays what seems to be the perfect Vulcan who shows no emotion and seems to have no need for any kind of mentor. Also, I feel like Star Trek 3 didn't have the emotional punch of Star Trek 2. It has its emotional scenes, but while Star Trek 2 got most of its emotion from the villain Khan, Star Trek 3 is a little lacking in that department. Now, I know what you're thinking. Sam, you're comparing this film a lot to the previous one. Well, yeah, I am. But that's because it's a direct continuation of Star Trek 2, and it had big shoes to fill. Overall, Star Trek 3 has its ups and downs, but it has more strengths than flaws. It's a film that pays homage to the classic Star Trek TV show and also introduces a lot of iconic elements into the Star Trek universe. While not as impactful or emotional as Star Trek 2, Star Trek 3, it still is a great epilogue to Star Trek 2 and shouldn't be counted as one of the bad Star Trek movies. It's a perfect movie to watch on a Saturday night with a friend and is probably one of my favorite movies in the franchise. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching and listening to my review of Star Trek 3,
The Search for Spock.
Doing my best here to bring you guys quality reviews in a reasonable amount of time. If you guys have any suggestions of what I should review next, be sure to leave a comment down below and I will definitely consider it. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.